They thought they could mock me forever. For years, I played the part of the quiet, invisible daughter, the one who didn't rock the boat, the one who was always there to clean up their mess. But this time, I walked away. I wasn't going to stay in the shadows any longer. And when I showed them who I had become, they couldn't look away. So, where's this mystery fiancé of yours? Or did you just make him up? My sister Lily's voice rang out across the garden, loud enough for everyone at her engagement party to hear. I felt my face flush as conversations around us slowed, and guests turned to watch the spectacle. He's running late from work, I said quietly, gripping my glass of champagne tighter. He'll be here soon. My mother laughed, a sharp, brittle sound that made my stomach twist. Work on a Saturday afternoon? Really, sweetheart, you don't have to keep up this charade. We all know there's no fiancé. My name is Sophia, and I'm 29 years old. I've spent most of my life being the disappointment of the family. While Lily excelled at everything, from her law degree to her engagement to Maxwell, a successful investment banker, I chose a different path. I became a marine biologist, spending months at sea studying coral reef ecosystems. It wasn't glamorous by my family's standards, and it certainly didn't pay well, but it was mine. Standing in my parents' perfectly manicured backyard in Savannah, Georgia, surrounded by Lily's equally perfect friends and their judgmental stares, I wished I were anywhere else. The late afternoon sun beat down on us, making the silk dress I'd borrowed feel like a prison. Sophia's always been creative, my father added from his position near the barbecue, holding court with Maxwell's father. Remember when she said she was going to save the oceans? Now she's inventing boyfriends. The guests laughed. Some looked uncomfortable, but most seemed entertained by my humiliation. Lily smiled sweetly, her hand resting on Maxwell's arm, her enormous diamond ring catching the sunlight. She'd called me 2 weeks ago to tell me about this party, and in a moment of weakness, I'd mentioned I was seeing someone. That single comment spiraled into my family assuming I was engaged. And when I tried to correct them, they talked over me, already planning how to show me up at Lily's celebration. Tell us about him, Lily pressed, her green eyes glinting with malicious glee. What does this phantom fiancé do? Where did you meet him? I opened my mouth, then closed it. The truth was complicated. 3 months ago, I'd met someone during a research expedition in the Caribbean. His name was Ethan, and he had been funding marine conservation projects across the region. We spent 2 weeks together, talking late into the night about ocean preservation, sharing meals in tiny coastal restaurants, watching sunsets from his yacht. When the expedition ended, he kissed me goodbye and said he'd see me again soon. Since then, we'd exchanged messages, video calls when his schedule allowed, and he'd visited me twice in Savannah. But we'd never discussed labels or the future. We simply existed in this strange, wonderful space where I felt more understood than I ever had in my life. He's in environmental work, I said carefully. He invests in conservation projects. My mother snorted. So he's unemployed? That tracks. No, Mom, that's not what I said, I replied. A trust fund baby-playing activist, Maxwell interjected with a smirk. How progressive of you, Sophia. I felt tears burning behind my eyes, but refused to let them fall. This was exactly why I'd stopped coming to family events. Every holiday, every birthday, every celebration turned into an opportunity for them to remind me that I wasn't good enough, that I'd chosen wrong, that I was a failure. He's actually quite successful, I said, hating the defensive note in my voice. He's just private about his work. Because he doesn't exist, Lily sang out, and several guests chuckled. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, seeing Ethan's name on the screen. Running late, traffic, be there in 20 minutes. Love you. My heart squeezed at those last 2 words. He'd started saying them a week ago, and every time, it felt like a small miracle. Let me guess, my father said, noticing my phone. He's canceling. He's 20 minutes away, I replied, my voice barely audible. Sure he is, my mother said, exchanging glances with my Aunt Patricia, who'd flown in from New York for the occasion. Sophia, sweetheart, it's okay to be alone. You don't have to invent a relationship to make yourself feel better about your choices. I'm not inventing anything. Then where's the ring? Lily demanded, grabbing my left hand and displaying it to the crowd. You said you were engaged, but there's no ring because there's no fiancé. I pulled my hand back, my cheeks burning. I never said I was engaged. You all just assumed. Because you let us, my mother interrupted. You let us believe you'd finally found someone because you knew we'd pity you otherwise. And here we are, pitying you anyway, because you got caught in your own lie. The words hit like physical blows. I looked around the garden, seeing the mixture of amusement and second-hand embarrassment on the faces of strangers and distant relatives. The fairy lights strung between trees that would look magical at dusk now seemed to mock me, promising a celebration I'd never be part of. I think I should go, I whispered. No, stay, Lily said quickly, her voice saccharine and sweet. I want to meet this mysterious fiancé. Unless you're admitting there isn't one. I checked my phone again. 15 minutes. I could endure 15 more minutes of this torture. Ethan was real. He was coming. He'd meet my horrible family. And then I'd never have to see them again, already decided, standing here in this garden full of people who should love me, but only seemed capable of cruelty, that this was the last time. After today, I was done. I'll wait, I said quietly. 15 minutes passed, though it felt like hours. I stood there, my heart pounding with the sound of my own breath, trying to ignore the stares that followed me around the garden. I wanted to run, wanted to leave and never look back, but something inside me told me to wait, and then, just as I was about to retreat into my thoughts, I saw it. A sleek black helicopter touched down at the far end of the lawn, the whirling blades causing guests to scatter, shielding their faces from the gusts of wind. The chatter stopped. It was impossible not to look. The noise was deafening. And as the helicopter slowly came to a stop, a figure emerged from the side door, pulling off his headset. Ethan. I didn't even have time to feel nervous. He was here. Real. And he was everything they didn't expect. I saw my family's faces, the collective disbelief as they watched this man stride toward me in the crisp, tailored suit I'd come to know so well. Every step he took exuded calm authority, and even from a distance, the way he moved was magnetic. Sophia, he said, a smile on his face, as he made his way toward me. He was perfect. The contrast was sharp. His presence, the confidence that radiated off him, drew all eyes. And for the first time in what felt like years, I felt like I was no longer invisible. My mother's eyes went wide. What is this? Lily asked, a slight tremor in her voice as she looked from Ethan to me. Who is this? I turned to face her. This wasn't about them anymore. This was about me, reclaiming what I'd almost let go of. This, I said firmly, stepping closer to Ethan, is Ethan. My fiancé. Lily blinked, her expression shifting from disbelief to discomfort. Maxwell, standing beside her, glanced from Ethan to me with confusion, his mouth slightly agape. The way they had mocked me, the way they'd assumed I had invented someone to save face, it all crumbled with Ethan's presence. The laughter that had once circled around me turned into awkward silence. The conversation that had felt like a suffocating weight lifted the moment Ethan stood beside me. I didn't know she was already engaged, Ethan said, his voice cool but not unkind. But I suppose I've been out of the loop. Lily's smile faltered. But you don't look like her fiancé. The question hung there for a moment, pointed, as though she was expecting him to shrink back or somehow stumble. Ethan didn't. I suppose I don't meet the standard you expected, he said, his gaze unflinching. But I'll be the one to marry her, not you. The bluntness of his words left the air heavy. I watched the ripple of confusion spread through the crowd. I could see my family's discomfort now. My mother's attempts to maintain composure, Lily's hand clenched tightly at her side, Maxwell looking lost. We were wondering when you'd finally show up, I said, turning back to Ethan. Shall we go inside? Ethan glanced at me and then at my family. I think we've seen enough, he replied smoothly, holding my hand. Shall we leave them to their celebration? I didn't have to look back. I already knew their expressions, stunned, confused, defensive. My family had ridiculed me for so long, expecting me to remain in my place, always second to their version of reality, but this? This was my reality. I turned to walk away with Ethan, feeling a lightness in my chest I hadn't felt in years. There were no more apologies to make. No more explanations, I had nothing to prove to anyone anymore. As Ethan and I made our way inside, the atmosphere outside the garden was thick with confusion. I didn't need to look back to know that my family was in turmoil. The silence behind us spoke volumes. Inside, the house was still decorated for Lily's engagement celebration. The champagne flutes, the neatly arranged hors d'oeuvres, the gleaming candles. It all felt so artificial now, like an event meant to highlight everything I had never been. Ethan and I sat at a corner table away from the rest of the guests. He didn't push me to talk, only letting me absorb what had happened. I could feel the weight of the entire situation pressing on me, but for once, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel invisible, at least not yet. I checked my phone. Dozens of messages, missed calls from Lily. One voicemail from my mother. I didn't want to listen, but I played it anyway. Sophia, please. You're making a scene. This isn't like you. Don't ruin this for your sister. Her voice wavered, a faint desperation in it. She never had to beg before. I'd always been the one to fix things, to keep the peace. Not anymore. The message ended, but the weight didn't leave. Ethan noticed the shift in me. You don't have to answer, he said gently, reaching across the table to take my hand. I smiled faintly, grateful for his calm. And then, just as I was about to put my phone down, my mother called again. Don't pick it up, Ethan advised. But I didn't listen. I stood up, motioning for Ethan to stay where he was. It was time I faced this head-on. The distance I'd created between us, between me and my family, had been years in the making. Now, I needed to finish what I'd started. Mom, I said when I answered the call, my voice steady despite the chaos I felt. I'm not coming back. This party is over. There was silence on the other end. Then, her voice came back, quieter now. You can't just walk away from all this. From your sister. From us. I'm not walking away, Mom, I said, feeling my resolve harden. I'm finally standing up. She sighed. We didn't raise you to be like this, Sophia. You're being selfish. Selfish. It wasn't the first time I'd heard that word. But it was the first time I'd been told to stay small for the sake of others. I'm not selfish. I'm finally doing what's best for me. The silence stretched. A long, heavy pause. I could almost hear the wheels turning on the other side of the line. And then, we'll talk when you're ready. But I knew it wasn't about talking anymore. It was about respect, the respect I hadn't demanded, the respect I had given to others while sacrificing my own needs. The respect that had been absent from this family for years. I ended the call without another word. When I returned to the table, Ethan was watching me carefully, but he said nothing. He didn't need to. My decision was clear. Do you feel better? He asked. I nodded. Yes. A little. And then came Lily's message. You've embarrassed me. Do you have any idea how this looks? The text lingered on the screen, but it didn't sting like it used to. I set the phone face down, focusing on Ethan. You don't need to apologize to anyone, he said, his voice unwavering. You're not the one who needs to explain yourself. I looked around the room at the people who had always dismissed me. The people who never asked me what I wanted, only what they expected. For the first time, I didn't care if they were disappointed. I don't owe them anything anymore, I said, my voice firm. He smiled, a gentle smile full of warmth and understanding. You owe yourself everything, he said. And in that moment, for the first time in years, I truly believed it. The following days were quieter than I expected. Lily didn't reach out again. Neither did my mother. They both seemed to have retreated into their own world, expecting me to come crawling back, begging for forgiveness. They were wrong. Maxwell texted once, asking if we could talk like adults. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. I had learned something in the past few days, not just about them, but about myself. I had been waiting for their approval, their validation, all my life. And when I stopped seeking it, everything became clearer. What I was worth. What I deserved. The silence wasn't as heavy anymore. It wasn't an absence, it was freedom. By Friday, I was ready to go back to work. Back to my life. I didn't need to explain anything to my family. I didn't need to justify my decisions. I simply needed to move forward. At work, my colleagues noticed the shift in me. I didn't mention the family drama. I didn't need to, but they could see it. I started taking on bigger projects. I spoke up more in meetings. I made decisions without hesitation. And then, as if the universe had been waiting for me to step into my own power, Ethan called. I'm in Savannah next week, he said. Thought I'd surprise you. Do you have time to meet? I smiled as I pressed my fingers against the phone. I'll make time. The change in me was undeniable. And it wasn't because of him. It was because of me. I had stopped waiting. Stopped apologizing for things I had no control over, stopped asking permission. The woman I used to be was still there, the one who needed validation, who stayed small for the sake of others. But she was fading fast. The next time my phone buzzed, it was my mother. We need to talk. You're making a huge mistake, this is about family. I stared at the message, not feeling angry, not feeling guilty. Just clear. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. A few hours later, I received another text from Lily. I don't want you to leave. I miss you. Her words stung, but not in the way they once would have. I had learned that I didn't need to choose between my family and myself anymore. I could choose both. But not at the cost of my own happiness. I replied. I'm not leaving. I'm just not staying in the same place anymore. I didn't expect a response. And I didn't care, because for the first time, I had stopped shrinking. Stopped apologizing. And in that silence, I found my peace. A month passed, and the noise quieted. No more messages from my family. No more guilt. No more wondering if I was making the right choice. I had made it. And with every day that passed, the weight lifted. Ethan and I spent weekends together in the city, exploring new spots, enjoying dinners that didn't come with a side of judgment. Our connection grew stronger, but more importantly, it was grounded in mutual respect, not the mess of emotional baggage I'd carried around for so long. The world felt different when I wasn't walking on eggshells. It felt expansive. Work flourished too. I had a new project that had nothing to do with the past, a chance to prove my value in the world I had chosen for myself. For the first time, I could say I was proud of what I was building. And then came the call from Lily. I want to apologize, she said, her voice more vulnerable than I'd ever heard it. I don't want to lose you. You're my sister, and I miss you. I listened, but I didn't jump in to fix it. I didn't rush to console her. I let the silence hold its place, just for a moment. I don't need you to fix anything, I said. But I'm not coming back into the fold, not until things change. You mean you're not coming back to me, she said, her voice tight. You think you're better than us now, don't you? I let out a breath. No, I said. I don't think I'm better. I just think I've finally figured out who I am without needing to prove it to anyone. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I don't know if I can do that, she admitted softly. That's okay, I said, the calmness surprising even me. Maybe you'll get there. Or maybe you won't. She hung up quietly, and I didn't hear from her again. But that wasn't the end of the story. Weeks later, I was sitting on my balcony, watching the sunset over the horizon, when I realized how much had shifted. The weight of the past, of trying to be everything for everyone else, was gone. What was left was the feeling of lightness, of choosing for myself, of living for me. It wasn't an easy path. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. I knew there were still rough edges to smooth out. Still boundaries to be made. But I wasn't afraid of that anymore. I was building a life I could be proud of. And in that space, I found my peace.